You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with Jon Gallo, bringing you news stories about Long Island and about Long Islanders. Hey, John, here we are with another show, this week's Long Island News.
Now, some reporting by another Newsday reporter who's thankfully joining us right now.
Yes, we have with us Michael O'Keefe. Hello, Michael.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Hey, you sound nice and clean.
Yeah,
very good.
Appreciate you hanging out with us.
Good to see Mark Carrington. I haven't seen him since March.
Yeah, I know, right? The reunions via Zoom, I guess, for all you guys still not in the office all the time, right?
Yeah.
Crazy new normal. But, I know we've been following your reporting, a lot of stuff that you've been covering over this crazy year. Definitely a lot of things to kind of touch base on. But I guess if you want to start out by telling our listeners, what we've been reading from you most recently, I guess, regarding the surprising or thankful decrease in crime, depending on how you see it, I guess, out here in Long Island and the reports.
Well, I think we need to sort of look at this in terms of the broader context. We've seen President Trump and other conservative lawmakers and elected officials sort of dragging the fear of crime New York City spilling out into the suburbs. I live in Brooklyn. I can tell you it's pretty pastoral here. It's not there's no anarchy in the streets. Just this week the Justice Department designated New York as an anarchist jurisdiction.
Whatever that is.
If anarchy means that someone threw a cigarette butt in the street, then I guess we have anarchy here. But my point being is that Long Island and New York City have both, and other communities around the country have been experiencing historically low crime rates for the last decade or so. And it's been, things sometimes inch up here and inch up there, but we are really seeing much lower crime rates than we did in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s on Long Island. And, I thought what was interesting, we got the crime stats from both Nassau and Suffolk County from their police departments this week. And for the most part, violent crime is down. For the most part, crime is down pretty significantly. But we're seeing the impact of the pandemic on crime. So the thing that really jumped out at me when we got those stats was commercial burglaries. They were up over 40% in both counties. And that's, these are crimes of opportunity. For many months, people haven't been in their offices. They haven't been in their stores and their workplaces. And so, criminals feel emboldened to enter those places and steal what they can find. Part of that also is, a function of the opioid epidemic. The one problem in terms of crime on Long Island in the last few years has been the opioid epidemic, because we're not just talking about drug sales and drug use, but many people who are on opioids, they steal from their families. They wind up stealing from neighbors. And again, these are crimes of opportunity. We don't see people, for the most part, holding up liquor stores or banks or things like that, although that does happen. But we see our people breaking into cars that have been left unlocked and stealing a few bucks here, a few bucks there, cell phone and things like that. But the pandemic has really kind of played a big impact on crime. One of the reasons why I think we saw violent crime go down so much is because people are sheltering in place, and there's less opportunity for people to get together. If you're not sitting in a bar at 2:00 in the morning and the guy next to you is looking at you funny, you're not going to get into a fight. There's not going to be a bar assault. So that's what we're seeing on Long Island.
Right. There also could be a fight, but nobody's going to report it with everybody socked in.
Yeah.
That is another question. I know, like you said, you mentioned the kind of crimes against property and the kind of crimes of opportunity regarding commercial kind of theft and things like that, where in that case, you imagine the business owner is going to obviously file and the criminal reports are going to be, again, fully followed up on, versus, like you said, maybe again, most in the early parts, people weren't out there that much. But if something happens, it might not be directly on the police radar in the way it might have been potentially earlier. A lot of the CompStat numbers, we are curious, to see how much, again, of there's being noise potentially in that data, I guess. Do you have any reporting, I guess, that talks about that? Again, potential anecdotal or maybe skewed data sets because of the pandemic?
We know that crimes like domestic violence and sexual assault, even in good times, are vastly underreported. And we've done stories in the past couple of months about both of those issues and the fact that, victims of domestic violence who once maybe had an opportunity to report the crime are now, locked at home with their abuser 24 hours a day, and they may not have the opportunity to go to a friend, go to a family member, a clergy member, or someone like that and say, this is what's going on with me. And I think the same thing is true of sexual assault. They've always been, those numbers have always been so underreported that it's really hard to get, I think, a clear snapshot of what's going on with those categories.
That's an important piece of context, definitely, like you said.
Yeah. It's hard to get a fix on if it's changed if you don't have a fixed number to start with or a fixed idea of what it really looks like.
Ed, another thing I know, because we did speak with the DA, Madeline Singas, last week, was talking about the kind of victim support kind of network, both from her office and then also from a lot of the NGO partners, domestic violence, again, substance abuse, kind of nonprofits that really serve the community in so many ways that might be taken for granted. But when they're not there, especially in these types of hard times, it kind of has further reverberation and like a multiplier effect. So, and I know that, like you said, it's tough to fully parse out, that potential kind of noise, like we said. But I guess, overall, can you speak a little bit more, again, in the context also of criminal justice reform and of a lot of the fears of that kind of, we saw 50A be repealed. We saw the Eric Garner choke hold ban bill passed in the state level. Can you talk about the nature of this crime report being so lower? Does that, you think it's too early to see any effect from that, or does that speak to maybe some of those concerns being a little overstated? Maybe
it may be a little too early to talk about the impact of police disciplinary reports. They discuss making those public. But I certainly like bail reform that was instituted at the beginning of the year. Police officers, police departments do not like it. They are very vocal about that. Prosecutors and district attorneys' offices are very vocal. They did not like it. There have been some tweaks to the law that have given
discovery.
In terms of discretion of who can get bail and who needs to pay bail and who doesn't. There's been a little bit more discretion now given to judges in those cases. But, I think one of the big things I would say to people who criticize bail reform is show me your data. Show me where this is a problem. So many times we hear about, one person who maybe gets arrested, is not held on bail, and then goes out and commits a crime. And the police and prosecutors have used that as sort of examples that bail reform is flawed. And I guess the question to me was, why? What makes you think that person wouldn't have committed that crime if they had bailed out anyway? Yeah. What is the deterrence there?
One of my big problems with it that to me just makes it almost transparent is I keep seeing that same person paraded week after week. In that, if there are so many of these cases, let's see some more people. But I didn't. I kept seeing one girl who did something stupid. To me, that speaks volumes.
Yeah. I think you're referring to a woman who she was arrested for throwing a rock through a store window or something like that, and then they caught her the next day scratching the side of a window, a window with a rock or something like that. We're talking about pretty minor crimes here, and we're talking about someone who's probably, we're talking about in general people who are mentally ill or suffering from some sort of mental health crisis.
That's
bail
a
reform,
big part of this.
Is the bail reform the proper response to this, or getting mental health help for people?
Yeah.
Well, that's one of them.
Exactly.
When we spoke to the police commissioner, one of the things that I said to him is, look, somebody didn't walk into the Senate this morning and say, hey, I had a great idea last night. Let's do bail reform. They did it because people have been languishing in jails. And I basically said that that's the law enforcement's problem. Because, look, that person languished in jail for some kid. I read a story. He was in there for 2 years. And it's almost as though they had just forgotten them. So, and there were more than one case. I mean, they could show you case after case after case of people who shouldn't have been there that long. It's that simple. And so I said, somebody didn't just come into work and say, hey, I got a great idea. It happened for a reason, that condition couldn't continue to exist. Somebody had to do something. I thought that they rolled it out too fast. And my biggest complaint was exactly what you said. They didn't give the judges any discretion. I don't like automatic laws. I just don't like an algorithm that takes the place of a person, especially when a judge may have seen this guy that's standing before him now. He said, I've seen this guy 10 times before. I know more about him than the algorithm, and I don't think he should get bail.
I mean, one of the things that about bail reform that we need to consider is what happens to someone. You mentioned someone languish in jail for 2 years. So even if you languish in jail for just a few weeks, that could be enough that you lose your job, you lose your home, maybe you lose custody of your kids, and so there's all these ripple effects because you can't afford to pay bail. And I think that we need to consider those things as well. When you talk to law enforcement about bail reform, they tend not to consider those things. They tend to just look at it in terms of good guys and bad guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little too binary, like you said. There's got to be the qualitative with the quantitative, and like you said, there's been a long, ongoing discussion that we did see kind of get reinvigorated with what happened during the summer and the kind of reactivation of the Black Lives Matter movement, and like I said, the kind of backlash maybe to that, along with other types of interest. But I guess what can we expect? Does it seem like now that we are going into the heat and heart of the election season, and obviously kind of legislatures are still interrupted and disrupted by the COVID crisis, even though they did pass a lot of this legislation, in this period. Is there anything, is it supposed to be a quieter period, do you think, in your reporting? Do you see, again, much action being done further on this? Or do you think that now that, these things got done, it'll kind of just sit where it's at for a while with maybe only minor tweaks?
I mean, the real sort of iceberg looming on the horizon right now is the financial crisis that a lot of, Suffolk County, Nassau County, many other communities around the country are experiencing, and it's going to get worse without federal aid in the future or state aid. And so, Steve Ballone in Suffolk County has already been talking about cutting $20 million from the police department. When you start cutting from the police department, what that also means is you're going to be cutting from services that either the police provide or that some other agency provides. We talked about mental health care, substance abuse care. All of these things that are tangentially, that are related to crime in some way. There's going to be an impact. There's going to be a ripple impact. If you can't provide treatment to drug addicts and they're left to their own devices, you're going to see crime spike. That's
we're going to pay
formula.
For it. We're going to pay for it
one way or another.
Down the line, deal with the symptoms, not what it manifests as later.
In terms of politics, I think, conservatives right now have sort of seized on this idea that our cities are hellholes and all of this is going to spread out to the suburbs. I don't think the data, and certainly my own anecdotal experience walking around Long Island and walking around New York City, I'm not seeing it. But I think we'll continue to hear that until November 3rd.
Yeah, the only thing that I see as far as New York City and the suburbs right now is people from New York City that I guess their love affair with the city is over. They've come to the North Shore and they're buying up a lot of real estate. A lot of city people are moving to the Hamptons and to stay year round.
Yes.
But for some.
I saw a story, though, like yesterday, that home sales for, I think it was August, were up in Brooklyn, like 35% or something like that. So, certainly Manhattan, and if you go to like the Penn Station area, that's so reliant on commuters, all those businesses relying on commuters, it feels like a ghost town. But other parts of the city feel very vibrant right now.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's really interesting how I heard somebody say that the highly taxed states and mass transit are on their way out. I don't see how that we could ever survive without them, but certainly their numbers have dwindled in the last, for a long time there, you would go to a Long Island Railroad station on the South Shore and the parking lots were just empty.
Yes, yeah.
Nobody. And that's a scary, because that imbalance is not just going to stay there.
The impact on the tax base, and a lot of times it is funding that goes into better school districts, but the nature of less money coming into the pot to be distributed down the line. Let's remind our listeners that they are listening to this week's Long Island News. We are here with Michael O'Keefe, Newsday reporter on 90.3 WHPC. I guess. Yeah, there's a lot. One other maybe just question, and then maybe we wanted to segue. I know you were involved with the reporting about the Supreme Court Senate vacancy after the passing of Justice Ginsburg. But before that, just has there in the crime statute, to close that up, the COVID information, the COVID kind of violations, is that included in crime data, or is that kind of separately reported? And just, I know they said they wanted to have more of a kind of friendly approach to it. They weren't trying to intervene and have too many arrests, but how is that playing crime data?
Yeah, that is not included in the crime data that gets released. The police tally this stuff on a daily basis. They're very data driven these days.
Of course,
but that kind of stuff is not included in there. And like you said, Long Island has tried to take kind of a hands-off friendly approach. And I think when they do come down heavy, they're using a variety of approaches in different agencies. You can have the police come in and say, you can have the police come in and say, you need to break this up. But if you really want to punish these businesses or get them to listen, you threaten their liquor license. You send in the town code enforcement people. Hey, you need a light here. Hey, your sidewalk is cracked. Hey, you know what? We're shutting you down. You have too many violations.
The fire marshal's a big one.
And that's been going on even long before COVID. That was just the way that communities were able to put pressure on problem businesses and problem residences.
Well, when we had been talking to the district attorney and the police commissioner, we're talking about I'm familiar with the entertainment industry on Long Island. And the number I saw, it's like responsible for about $14 billion. And you just think of just the slice of that would be tax money. It doesn't look like it's going to come back anytime soon until somebody can reinvent a way that pleases everybody.
You can only do outdoor for so long, It's going to be cold soon.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing. There's a restaurant right near me, and the biggest part of their business has been the sidewalk this whole summer. And I think, I'm waiting to see the big flamethrower heaters that they use outside. And I'm sure they'll try to work it all the way up to Christmas if they can.
De Blasio just announced today they're going to do outdoor dining year round now. So I don't know who's going to be out there in February, but
give out some hand warmers with something. Try it though, I guess. And it's a problem. I've been talking to businesses, and the problem is for them to pay for the cost to get that kind of filtration and all those things taken care of. Sometimes the restaurant only can seat 7 people. So they're saying, we'll try to hope that we'll just do a lot of delivery, and we'll hope that people don't mind being a little chilly while they eat, I guess. But we will see. It's a lot, like I said, it's been a crazy year. And I know, thankfully we've been following a lot of your reporting on it, but it's a lot to make sense of.
Michael, I was chuckling before because on the front page, we talked about your the low crime story in Suffolk County, but the front page of the paper yesterday was $1 million ID theft scheme. I said, okay, so we traded in a bunch of little hit over the head and steal your pocketbook kind of crimes for bigger. I mean, the crooks are
White
staying
collar.
in too, so now they're getting familiar with computers and figuring out how to do all this.
That's an ongoing problem on Long Island in particular. I don't know why Long Island seems so vulnerable to that, but we've written a lot of stories about these telephone scams. And,
the robocalls.
We mentioned
big
we mention it on our show almost every week. We try to tell and it's usually the older folks. They get scared. Well, my grandson's been in an accident. He needs bail money. All of those. And we try to tell them that these agencies will not call you on the phone. The IRS is never going to call you. They'll send you a letter.
They're never going to say, give me a Best Buy gift card.
Yeah, that's
exactly,
right.
Please Venmo and Cash App me your payments. Definitely not. But like I said, and maybe I'll just segue us back to close to the what needs to be done at the local level, the state level, but like we said, the federal level, and the importance of, maybe you could just share a little bit of your thoughts on what's going to happen with the Supreme Court justice vacancy, like we said, after the passing, as we see today, as we record this, and her being, kind of honored, going forward at the court in your reporting.
Yeah, I did a story earlier this week on Chuck Schumer and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had a press conference at Ginsburg's old alma mater, James Madison High School, which Schumer also attended. Right. I think that their message was that they're going to do everything they can in terms of just sort of slowing down this nomination process. And they were calling on members of the public, to get involved and to put pressure on senators, on the president, to not rush this thing through, to hold this for the next president. I don't know what's going to happen. To be honest, I'm frightened for the future. This election is going to be probably the craziest in my lifetime, and I wish I had a crystal ball and could tell you what's going to happen, but there's so many possibilities, and so many of them are negative. It's frightening.
Yeah, no, that's the best answer you can give, which is, nobody really knows. Anyone who tells you otherwise is, lying to you or has an interest, I'm sure. But yeah, like I said, we'll see. I know it'll come down to the math, essentially, as it always does, on how many people they can get to deny the confirmation of whoever they, propose. Can you confirm? Has it been two people that they've not nominated, but potentially have been talked about as potential Republican nominees?
Well, there's I'm going to mangle this woman's name. I think Amy Coney Barrett is a judge. She's been, Trump has said he wants to appoint a woman. He has a list from the Federalist Society and other think tanks, people that they say, these are the people you need to nominate. That's where Kavanaugh came from. That's where Gorsuch came from. So imagine, he said specifically he wants a woman to fill that seat, but I think they're going to use, one of those pre-approved people with this one judge who, Amy Coney Barrett, who's apparently very conservative and very embraces a very kind of extreme Catholicism. So, I don't know what's going to happen there. Like I said, I'm worried about the election. I'm worried about the integrity of the election, worried about violence breaking out as a result of this election.
It would seem at this point in time that the intention is for the court to decide the election.
But that seems to be the blueprint. Yeah, that seems to be the blueprint. And
and seeing again, how it may come down to that, and there just being so much different this year with this election more than any other election, with absentee ballots and what the president has been saying literally day by day, trying to discredit a lot of the accepted board of election kind of practices. It's definitely adding a lot and a lot of fuel to the fire, it seems, for setting up a very long election night and election weeks. It sounds like till we get solid results, but we still have some time. Bill, I guess, what else are you thinking about that specifically, about the court, and what do you see, I guess, potentially?
I really have a question for you, Michael. How did you feel about the Attorney General of the United States representing the president in I guess it was a civil suit?
Yeah, it's disturbing, and I think it's the DOJ, and certainly the Justice Department has had many problems over the years. But I think it was seen by law enforcement, by certainly by people like me who've been covering law enforcement for a long time. It had been seen as sort of a gold standard in terms of fairness, in terms of competence, particularly here in New York. The Southern District and the Eastern District were both seen as kind of, like, especially the Southern District, sort of the gold standard for prosecutor's office around the country. When you start to politicize the Justice Department, when the Attorney General starts to get involved in cases like that, or gets in, interferes, like in the Comey investigation. We're starting to hear sides. More about that now. Yeah, it's all very unprecedented. It's all pretty disturbing. And like I said, Justice Department, the FBI, et cetera, they've always had these sort of problems. They've always had issues, but you could look at them as sort of like the gold standard in law enforcement. And I think we're losing that. I think they're becoming, it's starting to take on the tinge of just another crooked, sheriff's office somewhere. It's very concerning.
Yeah, I think that the framing, so the Attorney General is going to represent the president. That means that it's not the president; it's the people.
Yeah.
So it's this civil litigant against the people of the United States
and taxpayer dollars.
Not the president of the United States,
and all the resources that entails. The Department of Justice has got tremendous resources at its disposal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not fly by night, a little law firm somewhere.
Yeah,
you'd want them in your corner.
How does a country go about getting rid of its Attorney General?
Well, he could be impeached.
Okay.
The president could ask him to resign or fire him.
That's
probably not likely.
Right. We need another way. That's
there's been calls to impeach Barr. They haven't really been acted upon, but there have been calls for impeachment.
Another, just off of your point to piggyback, Bill, about what's happening there, but maybe more at the state level. I know that it just came down that it looks like, I believe, Eric Trump will have to give some type of, deposition for the Attorney General, Letitia James' office in New York. Can you tell us a little bit more about where that stands or what's going to happen potentially in that situation?
I'm not that familiar with the case. I know it was one of the fraud cases that Letitia James' office brought against the Trump organization. Yeah. I don't know much about the details, to be honest, but, it was very much like a very direct command, like, no more messing around with this. I mean, the Trump this is one of the reasons why we're seeing a lack of accountability with this administration, is that they just sort of blow things off, and they ignore things, and they ignore things like subpoenas. They ignore things like orders to testify before Congress. And, if we want to talk about the rule of law, that's one of the most fundamental pillars of it. So I think that it'll be interesting to hear what comes out of this deposition, what Eric Trump does. He could take the Fifth Amendment throughout the whole thing. He could answer honestly. He could try to obfuscate, It's interesting. It's going to happen before the election, though.
True. Yeah.
Well, one of the whole things that really just, it keeps annoying at me is the idea that we can't indict a sitting president because someone in the Justice Department wrote a memo 15 years ago.
That's one of the norms Trump hasn't overturned, right?
I don't get that. I don't get how people weren't up in arms about the fact that somebody wrote a note on some note paper, and that is the reason why we can't proceed with, I don't know how many criminal accusations there are against. There's got to be a stack of subpoenas on the desk in the Southern District of New York.
I think if you look at, I think probably the motivation for that was we don't want to politicize the presidency all the time. We don't want to make, if you're constantly suing a president or trying to bring criminal charges against him and he's got to address certain issues, it's going to make a president very ineffective if all he's doing is answering criminal charges. So I think, look at the Clinton administration. The President Clinton got accused of everything of murder to running a sex ring to all kinds of crazy things. Now, Bill Clinton had his own problems and his own foibles, but he was not guilty of 99% of the things that they were accusing him of.
But these things are at RICO status. This is not.
Yeah.
I wrote a bad check once.
Yeah. I think
this is
pattern.
Yeah.
So I think there's a certain point where when the basket overflows or when the water's out of the bucket, somebody's got to say, hey, wait a minute. I don't think this applied to this.
It's part of the unique nature of the Trump administration. We've really never seen anything quite like this, where there are so many problems in terms of either legal issues, ethical issues, and they're so open about it. They're so, they don't try to hide a lot of this stuff.
No.
So it's sort of, it goes an avalanche of bad behavior on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah.
You know what scares me? You know what scares me is that after World War II, when they asked the German people, why didn't you do anything about it? Their answer was, we didn't know.
Yeah.
And this is the atmosphere that we've got now. The information is there. It's just in a sea of conspiracy theories and all the other garbage. And so people can basically say, I didn't know. I didn't know what was true. This is a repeat. I mean, I was born about 8 years after the end of World War II, so I'm 60-something years old, and it didn't take this long, and I see it's happening again. That's what I see.
Yeah.
Whether obviously other people don't. There's a really good book out there, by the way, if you get a chance. It's called "They Thought They Were Free" by Milton Mayer. It was written in 1955, and it's the Germans from 1939 to 1945, and it explains. He takes 10 middle-of-the-road German people, and he goes through all the things that happened and asks them where they were and what they were thinking at the time. And that's basically what they said. We didn't know.
Well, the key is to, like we said, try to learn from history and not repeat it for the worse off.
No, you know what? I've decided. What the statement is that those who fail to learn history are doomed to repeat it. Mm-hmm. Sadly, even when we learn it, we will repeat it.
Or you have the capacity to kind of go upstream against some of the competing forces that might have other kind of interest again that overwhelm even public benefit. So it's a long conversation, but
it's a weird time.
It's a lot. It's a lot to consider, and we're glad to have reporters like you, Michael, and obviously Mark and the Newsday staff trying to help the people on Long Island and every person out there just try to make a little more sense of it in their day to day and know how it impacts them. Both directly and indirectly. So,
yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. It's great talking to you just about all these topics. Well, someday I would just like to get, maybe 3 or 4 of us on the show and just do an hour about all the things we see that
there's a lot.
There's totally normal.
A lot to discuss. But let's just remind our listeners that they can obviously follow all your reporting in Newsday, and they can also follow you on Twitter at MOKNYC. That would be the verified profile. And you just want to let us know, and the listeners, again, what you're working on now and what you'll be working on maybe next week or so going forward as something to keep on radar?
I'm on vacation for the next couple of days, so I'm working on nothing.
That's a good story. That's a good story to cover, right?
When I'm back at work on Tuesday, and we're going to be continuing to follow these calls for sort of reforms in policing. As you know, the governor had ordered police departments and communities to reinvent how they're doing policing, and I think that's going to be an important story for us. Really for the next 8 or 9 months. What happens with that? How both Suffolk and Nassau County and their police departments respond to their communities, and then what kind of feedback they get from people, and then how they implement that.
Right. Yep.
We'll be
working out for you.
Yeah.
You do. That's going to be, Well, again, thank you, Michael O'Keefe, and we want to thank Newsday for letting them talk to us. Thank you.
See ya.
We'll see you next time right here on 90.3 WHPC.